Hello students, I am Dr. Saliha Jamal from Department of Geography, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. So welcome to today's class. I am again here with the course Climate Change, Vulnerability and Adaptation, and today's topic of discussion is resource and its types. It is a part 2 because it is a continuation of previous lecture in which we have discussed what is resource and its major types. We have discussed it three major types if you remember: the natural resource, the man-made resource and the human resource. Now we are going to discuss some other types of resources which are not actually the major type of resource, but still it holds a lot of significance and importance when we discuss resources. So let us start today's class. So in last lecture, we have finished on human resources. Now we are going to discuss the economic resources. Actually, when the term the economy comes here, so something that provide certain commodities, services, mainly related to the economic function, that may become the economic resource. That's why the economic resources can be defined as any sorts of stuff, material that is generally utilized to create and provide certain commodities, or we can say services. Those stuffs are known as economic resources, and these may be the man-made stuffs or may be the natural. Means if we talk about the man-made stuff like factories, because factories provide commodities and services. Similarly, machines and the tools, they also provide certain commodities and services. That's why these are regarded as economic resources. If we talk about natural economic resources, here land, water, minerals, forest all play a very important role. Many times these becomes the raw materials in order to provide the commodities and services. So just remember student, it is very easy. Any object, any material which is generally used to provide commodities and services are known as economic resources, and that may be man-made economic resources or maybe the natural economic resources. And you can see here the examples what I have talked about. Actually, you know that overall our economy depends upon both kind of resources, maybe the natural, maybe the man-made resources, because generally the raw materials are generally obtained from the natural sources, while when we talk about the commodities, services, products, they come from the man-made resources. That's why it is said that our economy generally use both natural and man-made resources. That's why the economic resources are also man-made and natural resources. Coming to again in more defining these economic resources, when we say products and services, these are produced using the resources created by the humans. Means we as a human resource, I have discussed what is human resource, because through our skills, through our knowledge, through our advanced technology, we can create resource, we can improve resource, we can transform the characteristics of resource, and that which can be utilized for various functions. So that's why here it is said we create, generally the products and services are created by the humans, and for this we require combination of resources for our economy, and this combination of resources may be the man-made and may be the, we can say, natural resource. We would not be able to manufacture the goods we require if we simply had only natural resources, because generally we create certain resources, and which in turn again produce commodities and services like factories and all we have studied and we have given as an example. Without the assistance of nature, humanity could not survive on resources created by the humans alone. Means nature is also providing resources and human beings are recognizing, refining and creating the resources. So both have a certain types of relationships. Means we cannot survive without the assistance from the nature, and on the other hand, we as a human being just get a simple natural resources from the nature, which we can convert into commodity and services. That's why both are important. So the most important thing here is to make sure that we have to manage our financial resources well, so we can keep enjoying the advantages of these resources at present and even in future also. After talking about the economic resources, let us talk about the capital resource. Capital resource come from the three varieties, that is natural, physical and human. You can see here natural, physical and human. When we talk about the human capital, actually it is related to us. The skills, the knowledge and information that we people have, are generally referred as human capital. What type of we can say technological knowledge we are having, what skill we are having, what types of awareness we are having, these all comes under the human capital. It covers the things like training, education, experiences, which form human capital. Like again, if we talk about the physical capital, means it should have certain structure, because when we are talking about the human capital, it is not tangible, non-tangible sort of things. But when we talk about the physical capital, it should be tangible and it has certain structure like buildings, machinery, tools, which can be utilized in producing commodities and services, are called physical capital. Means we are utilizing both here, human capital, their knowledge, skill, technology. Due to this, the physical capital are transformed to provide the commodities and services. That's why all these, whether we talk about the capital, human capital, physical capital or the natural capital, all play a very important role. If talking about the natural capital, the word itself is signifying whether renewable and non-renewable resources which are found in nature, they are known as natural capital. So all these three things, when integrated together, they can provide commodities and they can provide services. People have the potential for the productivity, and that's why they are determined as human capital. And this human capital, we the people, can only provide productivity when we have the physical capital and when we have the natural capital. That's why we say we people enables, generally utilize the natural resources, physical capital, and we can say we integrate these both the capitals, and then we produce it in the terms of commodities and services. So these are basically the capital resource. So now after discussing the economic resource, then after discussing the capital resource, we are going to discuss here the technology resource. Technology is very important. Just I would like here to give a small example. Firstly, it was the concept that any region which are resource region, they are more prosperous, more wealthier and they are more economically developed region. Means the resource defines the development of any region. It was the concept few decades before. But with the time, what the world has seen, actually the region, the nation which excels in technology, they are generally the developed region. They are more economically developed region. For example, if we talk about Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong, these are the very small territory with meager resources, but see their economic development, see their development. On the other side, if we see Brazil, it is having the huge territory, huge resources, but compare its economic development with Japan. Means the technology is playing a very important role. So as I'm from geography, I'm going to here quote some examples from the geography itself about the technological resources. For example, talking about the GIS, you must all be knowing that Geographic Information System, which is a very much powerful tool and which functions to collect, to store, to manipulate and to analyze the spatial data. Even we can call it geographical data. Means through this information system, through this powerful tool, we can even collect, store and manipulate and analyze the data. It is generally used to create maps, to study the patterns and the trends of various aspects, and also it is used for the simulations, predictions for the future. Another tool here is remote sensing tool. Actually, remote sensing is another very much powerful tool that generally collects the data about the Earth's surface. Means it collects the data without getting in contact with the Earth's surface. That's why it is known as remote sensing. Now the collected data is used to create images, maps, all types of studies like land use, land cover, land surface temperature, NDVI, NDWI. These are monitoring of the certain environmental condition, that all these are possible through the remote sensing. Another very much important technological tool is GPS, Global Positioning System, which is a satellite based system, and it is used for the navigation purposes. Even it is used for the collection of data about the Earth's surface. GPS can be used to create accurate maps by the coordinate locations. It can even track the movements and study the Earth's physical features. So, after talking about these also three important resources, we have talked about capital resource, technological resource, economic resource, which are the other types of resources which we have discussed from the previous lecture. Now, we are talking about why it is very much important to conserve our resources. Maybe the man-made resource, natural resource, most importantly the natural resource, because many of the resources are of non-renewable nature. They cannot be renewed back, and if these non-renewable resources can be renewed, it may take millions of years. That's why it is known as non-renewable resources. So when the stock is finished, depleted, these resources cannot be used again and again. So in order to maintain the sustainability of these resources, it becomes very important to have resource conservation. Not only this, even if we are using the resources recklessly without utilizing it efficiently, whether it is renewable or non-renewable, it can have various ill impacts on our environments. Again, that it is why it becomes very much important for to conserve the resources. So, conservation of resources actually alludes to utilizing normal assets cautiously, means using the resource rationally and efficiently so they can be re-established and keep on being utilized by the present generation and even by the future generation. Means the resource sustainability should be maintained. Many of the human made resources are dependent on the availability of natural resources. Already we know we use natural resources to create man made resources. So we have to understand the significance of the natural elements. So we have to conserve it accordingly. Many times we have to conserve to manage the ecological balance, as we have to use them throughout our life and even for the future. So because of this, the resource consumption plays a very important role. Another thing that we are talking about, because of unnecessary double dealing of the water, scarcity of the water, which is being overlooked at various spots, we can say that top utilization of the coal and petroleum, the reckless use of these fossil fuels, which will deplete all these resources rapidly, and we will not be left to use it in near future. That's why resource conservation becomes very much important. So we should ensure that generally we use these inexhaustible resources, as they are very much cost effective, and monitor the diversity of the life on earth in order to prevent harm to the regular ecology. So in the conservation strategies, we are seeing many of the industrial sector, many of the nation as a whole, they are shifting towards the inexhaustible resources, means they are shifting towards the renewable resources. Maybe in terms of the energy sector, we have observed shift from the fossil fuels to solar energy, wind energy, tidal energy, etc. So utilizing asset cautiously and allowing them to restore, we can proceed for asset preservation. So there are n number of strategies and approaches for saving these resources. Every individual have to contribute in this. Government have to devise many policies, and that should be implemented. Non-governmental organization, governmental organization, they should preach for awareness about the significance of the resources, particularly the awareness about the 3 R's we are talking about for the conservation of the resource. That is, reduce, means by increasing the efficiency of the resources, we can reduce its use. Then by recycling, means once the certain resources like metals, when it is used, it can be recycled. Then again reuse, the recycled resources can be reused, means 3 R's can promote the conservation of the resources. Let us talk about the 5 most important natural resources which play a very important role in asset creation in human-made assets. For example, air, clean air is important for all of us, even I can say for all the life forms on this planet Earth to survive. So it is necessary to take certain action to keep the breathing air, the air we inhale, very much clean, that is away from the pollution. Second very important resource is water. We know we cannot survive without water. The life forms cannot survive without water. And if we see its distribution, 70% of the earth is covered with the water, but only 2% of it has a fresh water. Even from this, a very meager amount that is generally used for the irrigation purpose, industrial purpose, and the domestic purpose. So initiatives must be taken to educate and regulate the use of water. Another very important resource is soil. Soil is composed of various particles and nutrients. We know it helps plants to grow, and for our food we depend upon these plants and crops, and soil provide base to these crops, plants, trees, etc. That's why it is a very important resource, so that we have to conserve it. Even these plants, trees acts as a carbon sink. It plays very important role to regulate the climate of this earth. Another very much important resource is iron. It is found in mineral silica, and it is used to build strong weapons, transportation, buildings. Even we can also call it, it is a backbone of industrial sector. That's why it is very much important resource. Talking about the forests, we know forests provide us with the clean air. They act as a carbon sink. They provide habitat for the several wildlife, and even preserve the ecology of the world. So if we see the trees are being cut for housing and construction project, it should be conserved. Now, after having the understanding about the resources and overall now we are going to see how climate change is impacting the resources, but because as we are concerned with the paper of climate change, vulnerabilities and adaptation, so here in this section we are going to discuss how climate change impacts the natural resources. Climate change impact, we know, every types of resources, even it is impacting each and everything which is present on this earth, in this planet earth. So, whether the plant, animal species, distribution, these are all affected by the climate change, particularly with the rise of temperature, which has altered the ecosystem and which has also amplified the existing environmental concerns, maybe in terms of sea level rise, maybe in terms of increase in the frequency of the extreme weather events, etc. So, particularly the resources which are affected by the climate change are forest and vegetation. If we talk about the risk, we know that the effect of climate change on forest varies significantly depending upon the species and various other variables, that is in which location it is, what type of species are present there, what type of forest is it is. But overall, we know that carbon dioxide level rises with the forest depletion. Even the forest productivity is expected to improve due to the climate change, but the rate at which forest depletion is taking place, that will impact in the regulation of the, or we can say ideal management of this climate, of the climate of the earth, because these forests are the carbon sink which absorb huge amount of carbon from the atmosphere. So, if they are depleted, it is very much obvious the carbon dioxide amount will rise in atmosphere, which in turn will lead to the global rise in temperature. Strategies which can help for the forest management, mainly in the region, must adjust as the potential effects become more evident. One viable solution is establishing the species that offer essential habitats for the wildlife while exhibiting resilience to the heightened pest danger because of the climate change. In various instances, introducing new species into the region may be ecologically viable and that can conserve current traditional species, but it is to be checked for the different region. For example, if you see this diagram, which is very much related, increase in temperature leads to increase in forest productivity on one hand, which is a good thing, but it also, this increase in temperature increase the risk of drought, fire, pest and other stressor, means depletion of forest here will take place. Shift in the distribution and composition of the vegetation because of the shift of the climate, we can observe overall it will decrease. If we talk about increased risk of drought, fire, pest and other stressors, that will decrease the forest productivity. Means rising temperature on one hand, it is increasing the forest productivity, but on the other hand, due to also increase of certain other stressors, it is decreasing the productivity, and even the depletion of forest will lead to increase in carbon dioxide concentration. So these all things has to be considered. Now, how the climate change is affecting another very important natural resource, that is fish and wildlife. If we talk about the risk, we know that the habitat zones are generally shifting towards north due to the temperature rise. Various animal species are also compelled to migrate northward, but there are certain obstacles like Great Lakes. This will serve as a barrier in the migration for the various species, which will create a challenge for those who are generally unable to adapt, mainly for the vulnerable species. So, species, for example, I must talk here mainly which are dependent upon the wetlands. They are at most risk because due to heightened rate of evaporation, they may lose their habitat, and even which may diminish if the wetland shrinks or if the wetland gets quality wise deteriorated. So, particularly they are at, we can say, great risk. If we talk about the strategies, a species distribution change can be taken in order to have positive changes. For wildlife conservation also require some type of shifts in the protected natural areas with the shift of the climatic condition. These wildlife conservation areas should be also shifted. So this can play a very much significant role in conservation of the wildlife. Another important strategy here is introducing new ecologically advantageous species into the region which has a viable alternative similar to the alteration of vegetation what we talked about previous. Means we can introduce new ecologically advantageous species which may have developed more resilience for a particular region. For example, see the relationship. Increasing temperature may lead to warmer water temperature that may affect more abundant warm water fish species. Means warmer temperature means fish productivity may rise. But on the other hand side, less diverse fish population diversity will reduce, and increase in frequency of the hypoxic condition may kill fish. So this is the, we can say, ill impacts of we can say increasing temperature, particularly warmer water temperature. If we talk about reduced summer water levels, reduced groundwater recharge, reduced wetland coverage, this affects the poor water quality. It deteriorates the aquatic ecosystem. So less wildlife habitat will be seen, species will be forced to migrate. Many times more frequent precipitation, increased flooding, erosion also leads to poor water quality and species are forced to migrate. Even the warmer water temperature, here if I may talk about the coral reefs, coral bleaching also is one of, warmer water temperature is also one of the factor for causing coral bleaching, making the corals more vulnerable to the climate change. Another natural resource which is mostly impacted by the climate change we see in terms of the biodiversity loss. Clearing the ground and eliminating all natural trees and vegetation is necessary because of growing amount of land that must be used either for the production, consumption, maybe for the forestry purpose, maybe for the agriculture purpose, maybe new material extraction, or even for building certain structure. We know that the population is increasing. Accordingly, the demand of the population will increase. So, the natural cover will decrease in order to build certain industries, commercial structure, residential structure in order to practice agriculture, forestry, etc. In addition to this, harming animals by destroying the habitat of certain wildlife, this also decreases the biodiversity of the plant life on the land. Means on one hand we can say that overall to fulfill the human demand in terms of more land for the residential, commercial, industrial purposes, for the agriculture purposes, we are changing the land cover, natural covers, we are removing the water bodies, we are destroying the forested area. So naturally biodiversity loss will take place. The loss of biodiversity has a severe repercussions and it will harm in another way to the human being in terms of food scarcity, shortages, in terms of water scarcity, in terms of certain air pollution, etc. Talking about the pollution, if we talk here, the quantity of pollution generally produced by the unsustainable production and consumption is also, it is obstructing in the production activities mainly for the food production, water, air system, which in turn will affect both human and the environmental health. So pollution does not only occur at the end of the product or services life. However, trash in the form of packaging, used goods is a serious problem that affect marine and terrestrial life. So we have to we need to take certain step in order to restrict this pollution. If we talk about certain sources, talking about the pollution, for example, use of the fertilizer, pesticide, insecticides, which are all, we can say, unsustainable manner of agricultural practices, and through the runoff they pollute the water. This is a great environmental concerns. Even the quality and quantity of all the natural available resources that may diminish due to this rebound effect of the environmental pollution. So actually these environmental effects are very much closely connected to one another. If we talk about, if one thing is polluted, it will affect the chain of many other things. So overall these environmental effects are very much related to each other. For example, if we take here, pollution causes climate change, and pollution and climate change both worsens the biodiversity loss. So we have to be very careful about it. After this, talking about the how the climate change impacts the environment and natural resources, another thing we are going to talk here is socio-economic impact. We know that natural resource depletion and the environmental harm can jeopardize the livelihoods. Here, just take one example. If the marine and aquatic ecosystem is being destroyed, or we can say depleted, deteriorated, so the communities, the people dependent upon the resources for their livelihood upon this aquatic ecosystem, that they will suffer. So that's why we say natural resource depletion and environment harm can jeopardize livelihood. Particularly if we talk about the data, in the world, over 1 billion farmers, resulting in nutritional problem, food insecurity and economic hardships due to the ongoing climatic changes. In addition to the inadequate nutrition, unsustainable consumption and production, which lead to the land, air, water contamination, which is even posing a great risk to the human health, particularly for those residing in the developing nation, because they cannot have access to the certain resources of adaptation. That's why for individuals worldwide, the exploitation of natural resources and the environmental effects of the unsustainable production and consumption practices have various socio-economic repercussions. If we talk about the main cause of conflict and war is, we can see here the depletion of certain natural resources. Maybe may see in terms of the petroleum, in terms of the water scarcity, and many times the inequalities also exacerbated by the various socio-economic effects because of unsustainable production and consumption, which are perceived by the different region differently. Actually, the poorest people are the ones who mostly rely on the natural resources, mostly for their livelihood. So they are more prone and more vulnerable to the environmental effects. For example, the farmers, the fishermen, the lumbermen, these are all, we can say, these are somewhat that community which are mainly dependent upon the natural resources. So that's why we call them, they are more in danger because of the environmental effects and resource losses, and also as they are having the fewer resources to support system or deal with this scarcity, so they are generally more prone to either, we can say, loss, or we can say overall environmental effects. So dear students, that's all for today's lecture here. Have a nice day. Thank you.